You're listening to Game and Chat, where we level up with conversations about gaming then and now. I'm your host, Daniel, aka One to Switcheroo. So let's press start and game on. Welcome everyone to another episode of Game and Chat, streamed directly to your favorite podcast platform. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, or all of the above to support the cause. And with that being said, welcome everybody to episode 9. We are back again, and this time around, we are branching out a little bit for the first time. I feel like the first episodes have been very Nintendo focused, either consoles, games, otherwise. Well, right now we're going to branch out a little bit because we're going to talk about a franchise and a game specifically that was not released on a Nintendo console, at least at first. You can now get it like on the Switch as it was supported recently. By recently, I mean a couple of years ago. But officially, this was a PS2 game, and is one game that introduced me to the PlayStation 2 for the very first time, and one game that really made a mark in my early years of adolescence back in the day. And we're going to talk about the one and only Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy X, it's going through its 23rd anniversary, officially on July 19th. So this is a game that, like I mentioned before, had made a huge impact, and it was such a pivotal moment, not only for the console that it was released on, but for the series itself. And as someone that played Final Fantasy VII but didn't quite get the grasp of it from the get-go, then going directly into 10 now with voice acting and the 3D, full-blown 3D environments and other great features that this game implemented for the very first time, make that click and make me a Final Fantasy aficionado. And I am very excited to share the part of my story with this amazing game, and how it is such a cult classic. There might be people that might be against that statement. However, we cannot deny that this is one of the most amazing, beautiful, and heartbreaking JRPGs out there, and one of the most bittersweet stories in any game, to the point that I can definitely say this is my very, very favorite Final Fantasy game. I mean, I'm really enjoying the remakes of 7 and Rebirth, of course, which I'm currently playing, but nothing will take me back to that feeling and that sense of journey. Not only journey around the world trying to beat the bad guy and save the world, but this is a game that takes a lot of themes, things that we already visited before in other games, but their approach is very special, and it really makes it even relatable for most of us. We're talking about, it's a game of it's a pilgrimage, not only a pilgrimage literally, but a pilgrimage of our characters, who we are as a person, and how can we improve ourselves and be better even when all the odds are against us, and what seems to be a cycle of never ending. How can we as people find a way to break from the cycle and find true happiness? Saving the world, yes, I mean, in the end, that's the point of the game, but more so, how can we save ourselves and break away from the thoughts and traditions? And I think this game really encapsulates this in a much, much better way. So we're going to take a look at that, guys. And of course, before we get started, I want to thank everybody who has listened to the Banjo-Kazooie episode from last week. It's actually getting lots of views, especially on YouTube, that I didn't expect it. So thank you very much for that, guys. I really had fun with that episode. I want to give a huge shout out to my lovely husband, aka Sounds by Sebas, who really composed that track with the banjo and the animals that every time I listen to it cracks me up. So thank you, Sounds by Sebas. I love you. I really appreciate everything you've done so far and supporting me with all these amazing tracks that you hear underneath my voice. Fun fact, they're all being made by him, so please be sure to check him out. Sounds by Sebas, amazing music producer, composer, and much more. So definitely encourage you guys to listen to his stuff on his website. But anyway, today it's all about Final Fantasy. Today we're branching out from Nintendo, and yes, it's gonna feel weird and it's gonna feel a little, off place, but I cannot leave this game behind because I just love it to death. And while preparing from this podcast, I just went through the whole story and the meanings and all that, and it's just amazing how they were able to come up with this so early in the 2000s. So without further ado, sit back guys, relax, grab a coffee, and let's listen to episode 9 of Game and Chat. Final Fantasy X and the dream that actually came true. And of course, we're starting off like we usually do, taking a little summary on how Final Fantasy X came to be and how the development of this game was brought to fruition. Of course, we already mentioned it's the 23rd anniversary. This was released in July of 2001, July 19, if I'm not mistaken. And, by then Square, which was right before the merging of what we now know as Square Enix. This was the last game before that merge happened. So, a lot of pivotal moments, not only for the franchise, but for the company itself, and how they were going to approach games moving forward from it. And yes, like I said, it was released on the PlayStation 2, and it was the game that introduced me to the PlayStation 2 to the very first. However, the development process of this game, of course, coming from 7, 8, or 9, and the PS1, as technology kept evolving, and now we have more power to bring those stories even more come to life, and and it really shows already. We went from pre-rendered backgrounds and flat PNGs used in all these previous installments to now fully blown 3D environments, and that immediately enhances the immersive experience. With that being said, we now have the access to dynamic camera, which we already had it on the PlayStation 1, but of course, since it was on this franchise in particular, by being just pre-rendered images or backgrounds, it's not like you can move the camera around, so they need to have the fixed camera aspect of it. But now with 3D environments, so we can look at 360 degrees. Now dynamic camera comes into play, and more detailed environments, which at the time it was revolutionary. Transition, that jump on technology in graphical advancements really made what game is today. And it might have not aged as well if you look at it from today's perspective, but I tell you, back in 2001, that looked amazing from the get-go. I felt like I was watching a real life location, and it all won't be possible without the key creative team. Of course, director, sorry if I'm mispronouncing this, sir, Yoshinori Kitase. He's been a veteran of the Final Fantasy series, and along with Tetsuya Nomura, which was the character design, and how he really nailed the character design in this game. I don't think there are any Final Fantasy characters, at least in my opinion, that I remember most than Final Fantasy X characters, especially when it comes down to the main roster. Of course, that's where we more fun. And along by 7, these are the most iconic set of characters in any Final Fantasy game, in my humble opinion. And not only with just the, like I said, we mentioned the 3D transition from the pre-rendered backgrounds is more so now that we have the technology. You know, the graphics were improved, the character models were improved as well, whereas before it was just a kind of like a PNG face attached to a 3D character. Now we actually have full-blown character models that we can play around, and therefore, in order to evoke a little bit more of the story and key moments of Final Fantasy, you are able to give these characters expressions. The first time that they actually implemented capture, motion capture happened, and like I said, you might have seen that today like age well or might look like odd, but we gotta think back on how we would, you know, like I said, the flat faces that I mentioned before and the like non-expressive characters that we had to evoke everything through musicality. All these amazing features back in the day that took the whole game and the experience to the next level, alongside with what's gonna be the pivotal transition and, you know, announcement of this game is just for the very first time on the Final Fantasy series, voice acting will be present in the game, which again, it is a topic of conversation for so many people on how the voice acting of Final Fantasy X can be a little overrated in a bad way. However, this was the first in the series, guys, and if it wasn't for the voice acting, I want to say it, I might have not liked the game as much, and I might have not had that impact on me like back in the day. I mean, we really appreciate the older when, you know, RPGs is just like text, and eventually, I mean, we grow with Pokemon. We understand how that works. But in a game as fully fledged, with a fully fledged story and, like I said, character development and plot twist and, you know, things that we only are able to fully convey if we see the expression of it, and they do so by doing the voice acting. Like, this was the game to do it, and I'm very glad that they went that route. And to the point that, I mean, it was advertised in the back of the box of the PlayStation 2, so you cannot deny that, you know, whether you think the voice acting of the game is good or bad, it was the first in the series. They had to start at some point. They had to have improvement and things to do. However, it is very appreciated because I think the game wouldn't be the same if it wasn't for the voice acting and how they really brought all these characters to life on this new console with these new tools that all the directors and developers were able to, again, bring to life. And I really appreciate them for, especially when it comes down to, you know, how the whole creative vision and like how they use like real world aspects of religion and, you know, like storytelling to bring these characters and all this world. You know, all the directors and the character designers and the music composer, everybody in general, how they played all these crucial roles in crafting all these stories, and how this seamless collaboration really made everything happen. Like I mentioned before, this game is about self-discovery and a journey to someone's beliefs and cultural matters that can change or can be interpreted in so many ways, and this is representative of each character on its approach to the whole, you know, religion aspect of the game. You know, the whole world of Spyra, which is the world where the game is taking place, heavily inspired by, you know, Southeast Asia. You know, you can see this on the architecture, the mythology, the clothing that airs, you know, given the fact that it's more of a traditional setting, very I don't want to say archaic, but they're very set in their own ways, and they refuse to use technology as part of your everyday lives because they feel that technology tampers with the beliefs of their god, in this case, Yevon. However, you know, and the whole same thing, which is the main villain, quote unquote, we're gonna talk about more about that later, but how everybody sees Sin, this entity that for some of them symbolizes, you know, death, and how it returns every certain amount of years. but then there's some like diehard Yevon believers that they wouldn't question a merciless god like Yevon will put their people to an inevitable destruction every 100 years, every certain amount of time, and how this really makes you question this, like, who is really the bad guy. So that's what we're going to touch on the story part of the podcast, but just to give you all the context of how this game can be interpreted and all the ramifications the story can take by just taking off that premise. I mean, no wonder why it was a very successful Final Fantasy game. I mean, of course, it was the first of all the new aspects like we mentioned before, which led them to selling over 80 million copies worldwide. And their storytelling, once again, is one of the most praised and most memorable in the entire series. So without further ado, we're going to talk about now what the story and the characters this game is based on. Is basically what revolves and how it really centers, and this specific topic will surround the entirety greatness of what Final Fantasy X is. So we're going to start with a little bit of background, of course, starting off with our main protagonist. Again, some people might pronounce this one way or another. I'm going to go with Titus, because Titus, I mean, it would make more sense because I guess it derives from like tidal wave, ocean, Spira, surrounded by water, Spira, a world which is filled with mostly water. I mean, everything is pretty much an island on this game. So we're gonna go with Titus. Titus is our protagonist, our talented and famous blitzball player from the land of Xanarkand. He is the one starting off his journey, and of course, we get to introduce to how he's getting ready for a big blitzball match, and now we just suddenly on our house, and then we just go out and we start meeting all these people, and you know, he's a star of the blitzball sport that is played on this land. So, you know, start with the kids, like asking for autographs and pictures and all that. So that's how we get to know a little bit of his personality, which starts very, you know, it's your quintessential 17-year-old sports cocky guy. You know, he's a star, the world surrounds around him, but inside, it is more of a conflicted teenager who is struggled with relationship with his parents in general, especially with his dad, which his name is Jacked being the previous star of the Xanarkand Apes. That's what the team is called on the blitzball sport. And he either trying to navigate his emotions between hating on his dad and how bad parenting has been done so far, and the fact that he has like a sense of abandonment in general because his dad just suddenly, he was already treating him bad from the get-go, but now it suddenly disappeared and we don't know what happened. And with his mom also, Titus's mom, who really was trying to protect Titus from Jack's mistreatment, but at the same time, kind of like a Stockholm syndrome, she would like let Jack do everything he wants, to the point that when he left, and then Titus will start questioning whether he was going to come back or if we didn't need him or not. Then the mom now starts neglecting Titus because he was neglecting his dad because they left him behind. So it's very complicated family relationship there. Of course, the game starts with Titus heading to the stadium. Of course, like every protagonist in any RPG game, somehow he's late for the tournament, or he's late for whatever compromise he has first. So he then decides to go on this quest of getting to the stadium. Oh, a quest, you have to go to a venue. Well, but anyway, you guys know what I'm getting at. And then we got this very first sequence, which it really, when you see this for the first time, it really showcases the quote-unquote power of the PlayStation 2. I say quote-unquote because at the end of the day, it's a cutscene, from a pre-rendered movie, but still the fact that you're able to like render these cutscenes on this console, you know, that before it was just a console to play games. Now you actually can watch DVDs on it. And seeing these images for the first time, and I'm telling you guys, because now, yes, you're more like, with how technology has advanced in general, it's easier to see how a game or some graphics have aged. But back in the day, on our non-HDMI TVs, it was just mind-blowing, and you could barely tell even at the moment what was the cutscene and what was the real game. For some reason, at least on my end, I couldn't tell, because I was just so excited for what was seeing on the screen. And just that whole sequence of the stadium opening, and then like the stadium filling up with water, and then all the players coming in, and like the whole like sequence of the first minutes of the game, to the point that when Tidus is about to go off the sphere of water and kind of do like a backflip, then he sees Sen, which is our main antagonist. Well, one of our main antagonists, not the true main antagonist for us to say, but we see this big creature approaching to Samarkand and starts like shooting like laser beams, starting to destroy the city. And how everything so like joyful and excited just suddenly just became tragedy. And that whole sequence also, when everything starts getting destroyed, and then we eventually run into Auron, which is our father figure, not our father, but our father figure throughout the game. You know, your quintessential edgy mentor that will like, you know, like make you look bad and make you look like a fool, but at the end of the day, it turns out to be the most important person in the entire game. And how, you know, he basically like guides Tidus. Oh my god, now I'm saying it like back and forward. Okay, so forgive me if I say it back and forward, since that's gonna be the case. But anyway, then he guides Tidus to get him close to Sin on purpose, and basically allowing Sin to absorb Tidus and transport him to the world of Spira, which is the world where the game takes events. And you know how basically, again, spoiler alert, of course, this is a podcast about Final Fantasy, a game for 23 years. It's gonna be spoilers, guys, come on. This was not a accident. This was actually mandatory, kind of. So then the whole thing happened, then Tidus get transported to Spira, and you know, his whole life and his whole world is about to change, not only in terms of where he's at, but just as a person, or as an entity, I would rather say. And then after arriving in Spira, Auron is nowhere to be seen. He's just on his own. He's running into Riku, which is one of our companions. Riku, a member of the Al Bhed, some sort of religion that developed on Spira, that basically is a kind of rebellious race that goes against the, let's say, the mainstream religion and teachings of Yevon, which would be the main belief and creed or religion, whichever you want to call it. And how he starts basically guiding himself through Riku on this new world, and how to interact or how to navigate it, because he's still confused and he still thinks he's on its side. But turns out that Tidus just traveled so many years into the future, and without even knowing that that's gonna be just the list of his problems. But after that, of course, Tidus, the whole game surrounds how Tidus can go back to his own world, while then he runs into these characters, and that's when eventually wash ashore and ended up meeting Waka, which is our kind of like a brother figure in this game. And then the whole thing with, you know, the whole misunderstanding, as he explains to Waka after he is rescued that he comes from Samarkand, and he also plays with Blitzball, and how he belongs to a team of a city that apparently has been destroyed from hundreds of years in the past. at least on Spira terms. So it's this whole conflict of like Tidus's journey, like who he is and why is he on Spira, why he experienced the whole Xanakar destruction was sent into this world. And eventually he will lead him into know how Spira works in terms of like, their living situation and their whole stigma with the constant destruction of sin every 100 years and how people live with that. And then he learns about the pilgrimage and the summoner and like the journey of the summoner in order to bring the peace to Spira for just 100 years. Not even like a permanent thing. And this is what they call the calm, which is the period on where sin is defeated and the summoner fulfills its duty to bring the peace to spirits for every 100 years until sin comes again, and then another person will step up to the task. So as he learns from this, he then realizes that this actually might be my ticket home. If we defeat sin, the creature who brought me here, maybe I can go home in the end. So that's where he gets involved in the whole summoning thing, and then he eventually meets with our female protagonist, and one of my favorite female protagonists actually in any game, which is Yuna. Yuna, who is such a humble and so selfless person, very kind-hearted. She's just willing to, as her character, being such a dedicated learner and who accepted her fate as a summoner, and she was just so, like I said, selfless and willing to sacrifice her whole life basically for the greater good of Spira, and decides to take on the pilgrimage and reunite and bring us into a stop just to bring a little bit of peace to Spira. And how then this journey of her going across the land and gathering the aeons, which are summons here, creatures that will help her fulfill this task, then they will just give everything to do this, and it's just admirable. But it's like the meme says, it's like everybody is counting on Yuna, but everybody's not asking how is Yuna doing with this. What's her real feelings about the whole situation? Does she really want to go through this? Does she accept the fact that she is going to die by bringing peace to a world that she won't even have to enjoy? Like, what are her true feelings about it? Because in the end of the day, the summoner's fulfillment and destiny and task is assumed that, yes, I'm going to do this and I know I'm going to die. While doing so, but nobody asked them how they really feel. And again, along with Tidus's journey of how to find its way back to his original timeline and his world, we find ourselves on the journey of Yuna on how she can deal with the toll that was placed upon her from generations past. Worth mentioning that his father, Braska, was the previous summoner who brought peace to Spira, so she is very inspired by her dad's actions, and now that's what is pushing her to go on with the pilgrimage and eventually fulfill the summoner's destiny, as they want to call it. So these are all our main characters. Of course, we have our companions. We already mentioned Riku, a member of the All Bed, with the uses of Machina, which Machina, again, it's what they call to like artificial machinery, and how the Yu-Jevon teachings and religion goes against the whole use of Machina, because it's like a man-made artifacts that they don't belong to this world. They're just created in this world, so there are some sort of like sin for them to go against all the what's naturally driven. Sounds like vegan kind of thing. But anyway, and of course Waka, being born and raised in Spira and basically indoctrinating himself to all the teachings of Yevon, he is very stubborn in the fact that he can only go by the teachings of Yevon and nothing else. So he had a very grudge against the All Bad, and eventually Riku had to hide her origins, and to the point that when it's eventually revealed, he really has a hard time accepting it. And just in general, when the game advances and like the story develops even more, and then we discover the true nature of the teachings and sin and the whole plot twist of the story, seeing his evolution to be able to accept what's, it's, you can relate this to real life. Like, there's so many religions out there and there's so many beliefs, and I'm in particular saying that I don't feel like the whole thing is 100% true, but I also think that the whole thing is 100% a lie, because all these teachings, all these books, all these manuscripts, laws, whatever you want to call it, had to come from somewhere. I don't think they just pulled it out of the hat and just like made it up. So there has to be a level of truth on every belief that people might follow. So that's just my opinion on that stance. So that's why I relate too much to this game, is because we can't just be close-minded and just assume that what you know and what you have learned so far is the absolute truth. You might be surprised, you might be disappointed, but that's the actual truth. The truth is like everything could be potential truth. And there's a level of truth, there's a level of lies and deception. But at the end of the day, we just need to live with what we believe, which is ourselves. And as long as we believe in ourselves first and foremost, we can overcome any sort of situations. That's why I relate to Waka, and I actually like him a lot as a character. Then we have Lulu, which is our black mage, anime voluptuous woman, because we always have to have one in our party or in the game in general. So yeah, a lot of male straight fans of Lulu out there. But she then would be the older sister figure to Yuna, 100% loyal. She was one of the first, if not the first, that decided to go with Yuna on her pilgrimage as the first guardian, if I'm not mistaken. Then along with Waka, and then Auron and Kimari, actually. Might be a different order, but that's the first four that she started with. And Waka eventually, after he does the final game with the Besaid Aurochs on Blitzball that Tidus helped him win, he decides to become a full-time guardian for Yuna. But basically what started the journey was Kimari, Lulu, Auron, and Yuna itself. But yeah, Lulu, one of my favorite characters of the game, is the mage. I love magic, and she's very useful with all her magic spells and status elements that she can help on battle. But again, all of these people that we're describing, including Riku and Waka and Auron, you might find yourselves that they have very similar stories. Lulu also have a backstory that involves past losses, and she sees on Yuna, like I said, it's kind of like a little sister figure on her, and she's willing to protect because she doesn't want to lose anything else that much that she already lost up until this. As Brief mentioned in the beginning, we'll talk about Auron. Auron, basically, like I said, our father figure that will bring us to Spirit in the first place, and then will guide us and mentor us throughout the journey. This stoic warrior that it might have more relation in this game than anticipated, because Auron was actually one Braska's guardians, which Braska being the father of Yuna, who made the pilgrimage before her, and the other guardian that was with them, which same situation that happened with Titus, was nonetheless than Jecht, which is Titus's father. So his knowledge and experience to just guide the group and Titus, and all the mysterious motives that came behind it, they really added depth to his character. And then in the end, when we see when did all that came from, and through nature of both Jecht, Titus, and Aaron, it just comes into a full circle moment, and it's just amazing. Lastly, we have Kimahri, which is the member of the Ronso tribe. He is a very silent character, and some people might say it's his least favorite, but please give him a second. The guy's been bullied his entire life. I'm sure the majority of us have been through a similar situation. So all he focused about is how to swears on Yuna and to protect her, and his promise to protect her at all costs. And all this because inside he's always trying to prove himself and his worth for him and its tribe, which eventually we'll see fulfilled, and how this takes Kimahri and really unleash his potential towards the end of the game. So like I said, all these characters have one thing in common. They have experienced a certain loss. We all say Yuna is willing to sacrifice herself, and she lost her father in the process. She knows that she has no choice but to do the same thing. Aaron experienced a pilgrimage. He lost both Jecht and Braska, and the fact that he had to live with all this until the very end. Well, live, quote unquote. We'll get to there. Wakka losing his brother Shapu back in a war that Besaid had to experience, and how then he sees Titus as has personality traits that are very similar to his brother. Now how he wants to basically, he says didn't want to use you, but he was basically trying to bring his brother back through Titus. So Lulu, of course, all her backstory and how she lost friends, family because of bad decisions made. And then Riku, who had also lost friends and her town being destroyed by sin, and by all the Yevon believers that have a grudge against the All Bad and how they're discriminated. And this is how all these characters are so cohesive. This is the most cohesive party members most video games, I would say, from the Final Fantasy franchise. I feel all of these characters really, really relate to each other, even more than 7. I want to say that, and I know I might get some fire for that, but I feel like how they intertwine and how main reasons of why they are how they are and how they all bring together by one that reason is that in the end of the day they just want to help Yuna overcome the teachings and really search for an alternative of what's done conventionally and break the convention, break the cycle of death that sin brings on. And more so because they also want to break the cycle of just giving up and just to accept that there's nothing but loss and despair. What they don't know though is what does that mean to Titus. And this is where the story goes crazy and it takes it to a whole new level. And for this, we're going to give a little bit of context because we need to understand a little bit, or at least try to understand how this works. Again, spoiler alert. Here we go. So we talk about how on Spira we have these powerful creatures that we summon, that the summoner is able to summon. As they're called aeons, which is basically our summons or creatures that we had in other Final Fantasy games like Ifrit, Shiva, Ramu, etc. On Spira, these aeons are being able to summon because of people that call themselves the Faith. The Faith are the souls of people who willingly gave up their lives to become some sort of like a deity statues that summoners can pray in order to be able to basically conjuring or summon the aeons. So by that saying that these faith are basically, they're not dead per se, they're just on an eternal dreaming state, which that maintains the existence of aeon. So way back in the day, 1,000 years before the events of the game, there was a devastating war between two powerful cities, which were Zanarkand and Bevel. While Bevel was known for being technologically advanced, relying heavily on Machina, which was the ones that first developed Machina in the first place, Zanarkand was basically known for its summoners and magic. So because of Yu Yevon, which was the leader of Zanarkand at the moment, was all against these man-made machines that would just pollute the world and bring it into chaos, basically unleashed a war between these two cities, and it escalated so much that, destruction and all that came with it, loss of lives. And Bevel didn't stop there because they developed such a powerful machina that basically give it an advantage over Zanarkand, which they only rely on magic. So as Zanarkand was destroyed, and is what we know on Spira today on the events of Final Fantasy, the ruins of Zanarkand are the result of that war. So then Yu Yevon, as a way to preserve the memory in basically the preservation of the city itself, came up with the plan. And being the magic entity that it is, it used a great amount of summoning powers to create Sin. And this is how Sin is born. It's basically this unstoppable monster, and it just was born as a weapon of revenge against Bevel and all the means of people who were just against the teachings and prevent the use of Machina, basically. The whole purpose of Sin was to ensure that no advanced technology could rise again, that they can cause such devastation. Yet again, because of the creation of Sin, and it created kind of like a loop. We understand this from, for example, The Legend of Zelda with Ganon and the Triforce, and Link and Zelda. Ganon, it's a cycle of never ending. There's going to be a certain time that new Ganon incarnation, whether Ganon or Ganondorf, will try to bring destruction to Hyrule, etc. It's kind of like a similar approach here. And, as Sin will continuously bring destruction to Spira, it is enforcing a cycle of death and rebirth, and just maintaining the world to prevent them to use technology, basically. And that's the whole reason why you see Spira as a civilization and they look way behind, because they gave up technology at all, because they think like by using technology is the ultimate sin. Therefore, Sin, the creature, will come to destroy them. So we said before how Yevon created this plan of how to maintain Zanarkand alive, basically, quote unquote. So basically what happened is that Yu Yevon just transformed the souls of the city's citizens that perished into faith. So it's basically like a collective faith that became a statue and would enter on this eternal dream. And they were dreaming not on just the perfect sort of idolized version of Zanarkand right before the destruction. And this version of Zanarkand is timeless. It will be an untouched city, disconnect from all. And basically, it will be like a point of continuation right before the war. It's like a Xanarcan that would have continued existing if the war would never happen. And as a result, they were real dream people. I know it sounds confusing, but they were real dream people that were born and existed and had a life and had a purpose on this dream Xanarcan. And one of those people is Titus, along with his father, who were inhabitants of this dream Xanarcan. And, these are people that were born and raised after the fact, so they are completely unaware that they're just basically a result of a collective dream. And what happens here is that as part of Yuna and the whole party realizing that the teachings of Yevon cannot continue, and the cycle of sin bringing destruction every 100 years cannot withstand, they wanted to bring an end to sin. But what happens is, by bringing an end to sin, it would mean that the faith would stop dreaming. If the faith stops dreaming, the aeons that Yuna pray and use them for his journey will basically disappear of existence. All the faiths that these summons belong to in the first place will wake up, and they would disappear. And if we go for this concept, guess what? Remember that whole group of people that became the faith that is becoming the dream Xanarcan? They will stop dreaming too, and they will disappear. Which means our protagonists will also fade into existence and disappear. And this is the realization that the player, us, experience right before getting to Xanarcan. It was like kind of the section before. And it's that whole debate again whether to continue and whether to bring the peace and bring an eternal calm to Spira finally, but at the cost of giving up your existence. And it's kind of like the tables have turned. So now Yuna went from attempting to make the ultimate sacrifice for Spira to have 100 years of peace, and Titus has the opportunity, along with Yuna, and convincing them and the party to bring a full stop to sin and Yevon, but at the cost of his mere existence. And it kind of takes you back. It's kind of like a Link's Awakening kind of situation here. I mean, the whole world won't disappear this time, but it's kind of like the same feeling. It's like, damn, our guy cannot be happy with Yuna on the end of the day, and it's kind of sad, but what's the right thing to do. He needs to push forward and move on. And this is the evolution of Titus's character, and how I like it so much, because how he goes from this annoying, cocky, obnoxious teenager that only wants to do is play blitzball and just curse out his dad, blaming him for everything, to now this selfless, willing to give it all human being who understands his destiny and what he needs to be done for the greater good. Basically, this is the actual greater good that Titus was tasked for. And at the end of the day, when Yuna grows more fond of Titus and vice versa, and establish a relationship, this makes even this situation so much worse, especially after fulfilling the defeat of sin. And that whole sequence before that, just basically Titus tying loose ends right before Zane will face Jacked as being the previous faith that will become sin in the end, and how he defeated it and basically close that chapter with his father, and now he's able to move on for the final test. And after that, he, despite of not being around anymore, he's able to bring that happiness and give the chance to lead to the love of his life, which is Yuna, and all his friends that travel alongside him, and how every single one of them grew and were more supportive of this new risk that they were willing to take, and eventually succeeded. But at what cost, I should say. And it's just, stories that makes you think like this is just amazing. And again, there might be some issues here and there in terms of continuity factors. And again, I'm not gonna bring up X2 because this, long story short, for me, that game does not exist. Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy X is just one game, period. I know there's some implications of what happens after and all that, but I'm not even gonna bother to bring those up because I didn't play the game. I don't feel like I'm in a state of putting my judgment on that. That's for the same reason, and I honestly don't have no interest because the gameplay mechanics completely threw me off. But anyway, that's pretty much a bit of a sum up, all over the place kind of sum up of the story. And it's you guys start seeing a trend here. It's like, and Daniel just likes heartbreaking end of the world kind of stories here. Majora's Mask, Tears of the Kingdom, Final Fantasy X. Like, cheer up, man. It's just whatever game makes me question something about life, it's already a cult classic for me, because we normally take these things for granted. And for people that are not into video games, you say, why are you crying, or why are you, it's just a video game. Like this whole scene when Tidus was saying goodbye with Yuna, the first time I saw it, I was sobbing, and I was like, I didn't even finish it back when I played it for the first time. I think when I was able to play it on my laptop, probably like 3-4 years later, on an emulator, is when I realized what happened. It was like, oh my god. It's how the story and the characters are, and the world setting, the music in this game is amazing too. Like, one of the most memorable pieces in any Final Fantasy game, in my opinion. And besides the bangers from 7, but that's kind of like more action based, I guess, the musicality of it. When with Final Fantasy X, it's more of a self-reflection and like uplifting and sacrifice and all these themes that we just talked about. It's just makes this game memorable. And thinking about it, and all the things, all the emotions you go through that game, all the emotional tolls that you go through the game, which every single character, not only with Tidus, but with Yuna, Auron, Kimari, Riku, Waka, all of them, Lulu. It's very memorable. Like, there's a moment in each game that each character has its moment to really stand out and really make that staple. I think this is one of the few games that every single member of the party are somewhat memorable. Some more than others. People might debate and all that, but like, this is one of those games that you, at the bare minimum, remember the names of all the characters. At the bare minimum. So kudos for that, and that's why this game is my favorite Final Fantasy game. And I cherish it, and I love it. I played it again when it came out on the Switch. I was so excited to play the remastered version. It was a great experience. I didn't do all the side quests. I wanted to get all the dark summons, but gosh, they were hard, and I don't have no time to grind here in New York City. So, but every now and then I will pick it up just to like be immersed a little bit on that world and try to get a little kick of the first time that I played it. And it's just a wonderful feeling that I don't think I will experience in terms of Final Fantasy games with any other games. And now then, since we took a little bit more time than usual on the story, but at the end of the day, this is what we wanted to focus on. But we want to also touch a little bit on the other aspects of what makes this game great, which is, mechanics, gameplay mechanics, visuals, and some of the side quests that you see here. And we're going to try to summarize this very quickly. First and foremost, like I said, Final Fantasy X was one of the first games in Final Fantasy history to implement new things, especially not only for the leap from fully 3D environments, but also to one of being the very first games to implement it. First and foremost, what it was the conditional turn-based battle system. By conditional, what it means is this is one of the very first games that you can actually do a turn-based game with the ability to see the order of actions right before executing the command. And this is a very big move from them, because not only these monsters and these bosses get a little bit more intricate with this game, but the fact that you're able to strategize better with the order of the actions will take in place, and how you're actually able to see whether when you select that command, the effects that's going to have not only on the enemy, but also with your party members, and how this can, increase their speed or their chances to attack. And it gives you a little bit more of a strategy on how to act. And, with the removal of the time limit, which was a thing on Final Fantasy before, because now you're able to just take a moment and strategize what would be the best decision and the best commands to execute in order to basically go through the entire game and beat the bosses in a more fashion manner. And this was a huge deal, because before you were with the pressure of inputting an attack, and and you can run out of time, and then the character will attack for you, and it's not exactly what you wanted it to do. So it is quite a very welcoming change, especially in Final Fantasy. We feel ourselves that we needed that little bit of extra time, kind of like a Pokemon kind of situation in this case, that you just look at what you can do, take your time, and then execute appropriately. And that only was well supported with one of the best leveling systems in any game, and basically one of the first ones that made it happen, and now it got distributed to so many others, which was the Sphere Grid. The Sphere Grid is one of the coolest things that happened to gaming, and I'm so happy that it stuck around for future games in different styles. That is, the Sphere Grid basically is how you collecting, I believe was AP, if I'm not mistaken. You will, for every battle you gain experience, and you will level up, and then your AP level will go up, and then you will use this AP to go to the Sphere Grid, and then basically unlock new moves, new abilities, new powers, new magic. And the way how they map this out to make this big grand sort of constellation board, that at some point you will have Tidus's board, and then it will interlock with Yuna's, and then you were able to learn Yuna's abilities. So next thing you know, you see Tidus doing magic and enhancing their powers even further. Same with, Lulu overlapping with Tidus, and now Lulu doing physical attacks, which again, Lulu's specialty is magic, but if you want to give a element of surprise, you can improve her physical abilities as well. So how they made this, and how, because basically what you do is kind of like a pathway, and you need to choose the best path depending on which ability you want to obtain. And the more you beat monsters, the more you level up, the more you collect AP, and you can come back and keep grinding in your abilities. But it's not a matter of oh, you reach level 25, now you can do cross slash, for example. It's you have 25 points, how you want to use them. And even up until this day, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth implemented a very similar system just now with the leveling up, and that is just awesome because it just lets you pick and choose whichever abilities and movesets works better for the character. And it's just awesome how that actually made the game even more personal, because you can approach this game in so many different ways just on the sphere grid alone. So, you know, you can grind yourself really, really, really hard from the beginning and try to get as many spheres as possible. Or you can just go along the way, and if you want to focus on solely on one character, you can just over level that character and just have the other ones as backup support. Heck, you can make basically Kimari the main protagonist. I haven't flushed through the entire game, although it's not the most viable character in the entire game, let's face it. It's just how this cool thing with the sphere was implemented, and it was so great that so many other games that came after improved upon. But I think nothing's gonna beat the original, and how comprehensive and friendly and great was to customize your characters the way you wanted. Of course, this will allow you also to enhance yourself and your power up, so you can get your overdrives and your summons, and which again we already explained in the story is the basic. The summons are the faith and the aeons, as they call it in the game, and how you will use this. And the good thing here about the aeons, which I like from even recent games, is like the aeon basically becomes a member of your party, and it will just take over your party, and you will have him until he either gets defeated or defeats the monster. And it's just how they really nail their ethereal and the importance of them, with how you obtain them, with the little dungeons where you need to place the sphere in so many places to create your path inside the dungeon, and then in the end you are rewarded with the summons. My favorite summon in the game, I will have to say I like Shiva a lot. I think Shiva, this is one of the baddest Shivas in the entire franchise. I mean, yeah, she might have looked better in later games, but I think the Shiva from this game, I don't know, there's something about her that is very, very sassy, very like badass. And then when she does the diamond dust, and like she just like snaps her fingers and like everything goes away, and it's just so freaking cool. So I had to give it to Shiva. I like Bahamut a lot. I think Bahamut's design in this game is really good. But one that really takes the cake for me, one of the optional summons, it's Yojimbo. I feel it's really cool, the whole samurai theme, and his whole like summon sequence of how he just walks with his sword, and like, I don't know, I think it's really cool and very unique too, that you can only make him attack by paying him money. He's a contract assassin after all. So Yojimbo is awesome. It is freaking awesome, actually. I think it's a toss-up between Shiva and Yojimbo. I think Yojimbo's going to take it in the end, just because design-wise, I think he's just really freaking cool. Of course, we're going to talk about soundtrack. Like we said before, like this soundtrack is just, like I said, it cannot be other than memorable and melancholic, but in such a relieved way. I don't know how to say it. It's like a sad song, but also give you like some sort of like sense of relief, especially when we're talking about the track to Xanarkand, which is the one that plays in the beginning of the game, and the one that you know, as you progress, you run into the Xanarkand ruins and you get the first view for the first time. And it's just crazy how they really nailed the ethereal aspect of the game. And even when the creed, the cry, I don't know how to call it, the theme of Yevon, like that alone, it's like, okay, take me to church, I guess. How they just come up with those like themes like that. And again, I mean, credit to where credit's due, Nobuo Uematsu, which is one of the legendary composers of this franchise, along with Masashi Hamauzu and Junya Nakano. Amazing work with the music. And again, this is one of the soundtracks that it's on my rotation when it comes down to gaming music. And of course, we cannot left behind, of course, the whole Suteki Dane, which is the theme, the love song of basically Tidus and Yuna, and how it plays on that one of the major sequences in the game where they're on the lake and Yuna is breaking down and Tidus is here to comfort her, and that's where they have the first kiss. And like that whole thing is just, it's beautiful. It's like, the thing is like with this game is like, it's like that first time when you watch Avatar the movie, the first Avatar, when you saw it for the first time, and the whole Blu-ray glory, when Blu-ray was like just being like going out there. That's how Final Fantasy X appeared to me when I was 11 when I played it. And especially that sequence, how beautiful, like the graphics, the color, the cutscene itself was just awesome from start to finish. And you know, it only enhances what the game already is, which is iconic and beautiful, not only visually and story-wise, but also the musicality of it. And of course, we are talking about how other little side quests within the game, and this is something that we need to bring up real quick. It's the fact of Blitzball being like an actual side quest that you can do, and you can actually like, there's like a whole Blitzball tournament that you can literally forget about the game and just play and level up and participate. So my relationship with Blitzball, I remember it not getting it at all at first, to the point that it was kind of annoys me that I had to go to the whole Blitzball tournament. I couldn't just skip it in order to continue with the story. That was like my first playthrough. It's kind of like a similar feeling right now. For example, I'm still playing Rebirth, and I just simply don't like the fact that some of the quests, part of the main mission quest, involves you playing the dang Queen's Blood card game, which, oh my god, like, listen, it's not bad. Like, I kind of get it kind of thing, but at the end of the day, like, I just want to finish this game because I've been like dragging it. I have so many things on my backlog that I need to clear out, so I want to finish. I love it, don't get me wrong. I just want to get to the nitty-gritty of the story. Like, I know what it's awaiting for me. It's just slowing me down, so I just want to just move forward with it. Yet again, the game itself, I think it's actually really cool, and it's very creative because they're basically making, and that's what it is, a game within a game. And I can totally see them releasing the Queen's Blood like card decks as merch and as an actual real game in the future. With Blitzball, it's on Final Fantasy X. With Blitzball is the fact that you have this whole like kind of like a soccer / water polo tournament happening, and it has its own rule sets, and it has its own like leveling systems and stats and all that. And once I actually sit down and try to comprehend it, it is actually kind of fun, which again, it has its drawbacks, and you know, could be much more fast paced, which really makes me excited, because if there's gonna be a remake of this game, which I really, really hope it is, if they really, really nail the Blitzball part of it, that could turn into its own spin-off game if they really do it right. Because it is fun and it is very creative how I really enjoy it. Once I understand it, once I did my third playthrough, being older and all that, it was actually really fun and very creative. So I had to give it to the developers to include in that, because, you know, it might not be as popular as other people think, but the people who really put the grind on it, it's really nice. And, you know, other side quests within the game, of course, we talk about Yojimbo, how it was like an optional summon. That whole side quest going through the cave and then finding him just to find out that he only wants money and you need to make your offer. And if you don't make enough of your offer, then you might lose it forever. You also have the Monsters Arena, which, again, this might be actually one of the grindiest side quests in the games. The fact that in order to complete the thing, you need to capture and 10 monsters of each kind in the game in order to complete the monster arena and fight all the monsters. It's just insane. The lightning side quest to get, I believe it's Riku's ultimate weapon. That is borderline evil. I don't know what else to call it, because not only don't you get like a heads up, like a clear heads up of when the lightning's gonna strike, you also don't get a counter, and you have to dodge it 200 times. And not only that, God forbid that after you dodge it 200 times and then you go to get the chest and then come back, doesn't hit you again, because you need to start all over again. That's where things got a little like, ugh, come on, you could have just put a little bit more effort into not doing this more like Unforgiven. And of course, we talk about the final aeons, like the dark aeons that came in on a different version of the game, the retail game. That basically each aeon has like a darker version that is much, much, much more powerful, but getting it is much, much, much harder. And I believe the only one I was able to obtain, which I really, really grinded very hard, was I think I got Belfour and I got Shiva. I tried to get Anima, but Jesus Christ, that was traumatizing, to say the least. But yeah, side quests in the game, honestly, like, I play most of them just for like to get like the ultimate weapons and all that. But I was mainly focused on like the main story, and that's why I care about the game even more. There's another section of the story that you find this little like spheres like across the world that were left by Jack and Braska when they did the pilgrimage, and that will give you a little bit more of a background story of their journey. So you have a story within a story. And you know, I didn't collect them all, DC, most of them, so I kind of have an idea what they went through. It's just how crazy like things develop like in the end. And you know, especially after eventually when you run into this ball, when you find out that Aaron was actually killed by Yunalesca, and he's also a dream of the faith. Basically, in this case was Sin who was keeping him alive, because Sin was jacked and they was his friend. And by Sin being eliminated, then he just disappears into nothing. It's just like Titus. It's just crazy. But then there's more context about how Jack's journey went and how he also had a character transformation for being this like alcoholic, good for nothing, like, yes, a star of the Blitzball, but such a bad father and all that, and how he comes to peace to that, to the point that he just wants to see Titus to, on its own way, say, I'm sorry for what I did, and I'm sorry I had to drag you into this, and please help me to break the cycle. And that's how they both came together and basically closed the loop of their relationship, and they're tied the loose ends. And you know, it's just great to see, like, in the end of the day, yeah, it wasn't the healthiest relationship, but even you're able to find closure. And only with closure, if you're experiencing something like that, is how you're able to move forward. There's nothing good comes from holding into grudges. It's just a matter of how you learn to live with them and move on and achieve what's best for your life. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we reached the end of this episode. It ended up being longer than I was expecting, but again, this is a game that, you know, it's all about the story. And at the end of the day, that's the main focus. And how, you know, and I keep saying this, and I said this on a previous episodes, right now it's like, and this is what's like kind of like the starting point on like where video games were creating stories that they were even more memorable and everlasting that most of movies and TV shows you see throughout the year. This is one of the first games, you know, I know Zelda was one of the first ones that started on the 64 era, But then here, as the generation move forward, it really tells you like, wow, I can actually have these feelings and this level of entertainment and legacy and memories from a video game. And that's awesome. And games like this, games like Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and Final Fantasy VII eventually on the PlayStation 1, it was starting giving the glimpse of like what a very powerful storytelling can you provide with video games. And that only solidify the future of what nowadays is the gaming industry, which is one of the biggest industries now in the world and one of the most profitable ones as well. It's moments like this that, like I said, made me realize how much I love video games, because it's not only about gameplay and getting distracted, that you get involved in these stories, on these characters, and you relate to all of their qualities and, you know, all of their defects, to call it one matter. And, you know, that's very important in order to make a game memorable, in terms, if it's a game, especially if it's an RPG, because in the end of the day, these are like heavy based games. And Final Fantasy X is the perfect example of that, and it will always remain like that. And for so many of you also, I mean, if you made it to this point on the podcast, you pretty much love this game even more than I do. So it's amazing to think that even like more than 20 years later, we're still found ourselves reminiscing of this game and its amazing story and characters. Of course, all the influences that came after, like I said, we mentioned the Sphere Grid, how that was implemented on later JRPGs in different ways, and how basically it's a staple of the turn-based battle system right now. And, you know, this game only got better with the HD remaster, which, fun fact, I did not know there was a 2013 HD remaster when it was released for the first time. So I remember playing it later in the year, just the original PlayStation 2 version, only to find out that I was grinding and getting my characters leveled up, only to find out that there was like an HD version. And I was nothing but disappointed. But anyway, I got my chance on the Switch when it came out, I believe in 2018, 2019, I don't remember. So I got my kick of the remaster version. And listen, there are rumors that a remake is coming within the next 2 to 3 years. So I really hope so, because again, if anything, it's just gonna improve, and it's gonna be wonderful to see this game with a modern, fresh coat of paint. And literally, you don't have to change the story at all. Just leave the story, do the normal changes in terms of dialogue, and, you know, adapt things to modern day standards. But this is a masterpiece as it is, and I hope it remains that way. So thank you everybody for listening. This was Final Fantasy X, my first non-Nintendo game covered here on the podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed the listening. On a totally unrelated note, I just finished Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, and I have a message to say to the fans. I get it now. I get it. And guess what? That's going to be the next episode. It's how this game, actually, that I just played for the very first time on the Nintendo Switch, made it to one of the top Mario RPGs ever, and how I totally get it. So look forward for that, guys. I really appreciate every single one of you. Again, thank you so much for the support on the podcast so far. Turns out my Banjo-Kazooie episode from before, it's actually doing pretty well on YouTube, and it's thanks to you. Thank you so much again for all the supports and the views there so far. And got my first comment on there too, which got me really excited. And, you know, especially because of that banjo bop that Sounds by Sebas did for me. So again, thank you, Sounds by Sebas, aka my husband. I love you. Again, this piece that you're listening in the background was made by him as well. So thank you so much, and I hope you guys support him on his endeavors. And again, you guys know where to find me. Social media, X, Blue Sky, @123Switcheroo. And we're streaming every week, once or twice, on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/12switcheroo, and you can catch the VODs on YouTube as well if you missed it. Once again, thank you so much for listening, everybody. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. This is Daniel, aka 12switcheroo, signing off. Game on.